Okay, so the next exercise we are going to demonstrate is the barbell row. So to do this, Noah is going to use the same grip pattern that we demonstrated in the deadlifting portion, and he is going to unrack the bar, take a couple steps back. So first setup that we're going to use, or first note we're going to use the setup is he's going to hinge at the hips, about till the bar hits his knees. Hold this position while he's bracing his low back and abdominals, and pull to his belly button. So again, things to note here while he's pulling, making sure he is bracing his low back and his abdominals to keep that tight core, hinging till the bar hits his knees, and pulling to his belly button. Okay, so the next thing we are going to talk about is some of the compensations that you will see with the barbell row. So the first one you'll see is excessive momentum that Noah is going to demonstrate. And you can see he's using his torso to hike the weight up to get to his belly button. So a way we can fix this is probably by lowering the weight and resetting the form to make sure that they're not having to use excessive momentum to achieve the lift. The next one we are going to talk about is shortening the range of motion. So you can see Noah does not bend over, or he's not hip hinged far enough. Thus, he is shortening the range of motion. So we want to make sure that the bar is going down to his knees, all the way up to his belly button. The third compensation you might see is excessive spinal flexion. So you can see in his low back, he's very rounded. And although he's getting the full range of motion, he is not maintaining a neutral spine. So we want to make sure Noah reset, stand up tall. We want to brace his low back and his core, maintain that neutral spine, achieve the lift. And the last one is shoulder shrugging. So as you can see, he is not keeping his scapula depressed. Thus, he is giving that shoulder shrug sign. So we make sure, okay, of course, when he goes down to the bottom of the lift, down to his knees, keeping his shoulders down and the scapula depressed, then pulling towards his belly button. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is cueing and modifying the horizontal pull, otherwise known as the barbell row. So here are the 3 cues we decided to go over. The first one, reminding the client to keep it tight. And essentially this just means activating your core. You can see a picture here on the left that he is not hunched over or anything like that because his core has been activated. As you can see over here, this guy has a little bit more spinal flexion. And again, we would just remind the client to just keep it tight and keep that core activated throughout the entire movement. The second one, a cue we decided to go over was to remain stiff while doing this exercise, otherwise known as not using momentum or not rocking. This one was a little bit more challenging to find in picture form, so I gave a link to a YouTube video and a guy that does a pretty good job of explaining kind of what's going on when it comes to using a lot of momentum. And usually this is due to people are just using too much weight and are unable to do the movement without rocking back and forth or using a lot of momentum. So essentially, just make sure that once you've gotten to this position right here, that you remain in that position, that you're not shifting back on your heels or swaying forward or changing your hip angle to gain some momentum. And then the third cue we decided to go over was just to squeeze your shoulder blades at the top of the movement. So once you've reached your belly button, you want to make sure you just squeeze your shoulder blades together. And yep, that's what you need to do for that. So modifying the exercises, we're going to go over in a little more detail each one of these categories. So we'll start with modifiable factors. First of which being having too much or too little elbow flare. So we want to make sure they're not at, they don't have too much elbow flare. This is similar to bench press. the idea that you're at 90-degree elbow flare, and that might be a little too much. In the same fashion that being having your elbows tucked in near your torso also might be too little. So you want to kind of find that happy medium, and again, wherever just the patient is comfortable with. Grip width, ideally, it's going to be somewhere around shoulder width apart, but let the client kind of experiment with that, like what feels good to them, what feels correct to them. So again, ideally, it's going to be somewhere around shoulder width, um, but you can kind of play around with this a little bit. And then angle of the hip. So everyone's got different anatomy. Someone's got a little bit longer torso, longer legs, longer arms. So you might have to change the angle of the hip. So, having the torso a little more vertical or a little more horizontal might change how the movement feels, and if it may make the client feel more comfortable with the movement. So next thing we'll talk about is ensuring proper bracing. So you can see in this picture, you want to make sure that at the beginning of the movement, as you are putting or having the barbell come down to the knees as you're leaning over, you want to make sure that your head is up, your shoulders are down, and your core is engaged, keeping that neutral spine. And so once you've gotten about to the knees, or about where it feels comfortable for the client, you would have, of course, the client pull the barbell up to the belly button and have them squeeze their shoulder blades back together. And I just wanted to, in this slide, I also just wanted to re-emphasize, make sure the hips and knees are kind of locked in place and that they are not swaying back and forth or using their torso to gain momentum with this movement. If they're doing that, they're probably using too much weight, and we need to go down on the weight. So the next thing we can modify is changing the range of motion. So again, similar to other exercises, ideally, yes, we would want to strengthen through the entire range of motion. But if the client is lacking a little bit of range of motion in certain areas, this is of course something you're going to have to modify, and that's okay. You have to kind of take what you can get. So if they can only work through a certain range of motion, well, let's strengthen in that range of motion. So specific to barbell rows, something you can do is, of course, you can just do a half row or quarter row, or again, whatever the range of motion offers. But something else you can try is a rack pull. So you can see this guy he is setting the barbell down, and you can, of course, you can adjust to whatever height you feel necessary. But he is just pulling from, instead of having it come down to his knees and just hanging in that position, he's pulling from the rack. So again, this gives you the ability to adjust the range of motion in which they are doing the movement from. So, in the last option to modify is just finding another exercise. And again, I've said it before in other modules, but the best exercise program is the one that you will follow. So finding something, if they don't enjoy, for whatever reason, doing the barbell row, finding something that they do enjoy. And all these exercises here, doing a body weight row, doing a dumbbell row, doing a cable row, with all the different types of grips that would offer, with ropes or neutral grip or anything like that. And then doing a hammer strength row, and all the different forms of grips it offers, just finding something that the patient or the client rather enjoys. So that'll be the most important thing for us. And any of these options are going to offer very similar advantages to what the barbell row will offer.